So my passion for wanting to work with family or wanting to change family comes from my own family of origin, and knowing that addiction, alcoholism, addiction, it is a disease, and that it is progressive, chronic, and left untreated, fatal, but that families also play a part in the disease. And the change and transformation is possible.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman, and today's guest is Dr. Louise Stanger, and she is going to be talking to me about interventions, drug addiction, mental health issues, and some of the issues seniors are facing in those areas. More about that in a second. First, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Check that out. All the episodes are on there, and synopses of the episodes, photos of my guests, a little bio on myself, a donate button if you'd like to support the show. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Add with Bob Nickman to find that YouTube channel. And you can listen to the episodes there, too. Maybe you're playing around on the computer and you want to hear a good podcast. So check that out. Dr. Louise Stanger is my guest today. Louise has been involved in the recovery industry for many decades as an interventionist and a social worker, a teacher, and she lectures all around the country. And we're going to be talking about drug addiction, mental health issues, how we her approach to interventions, and some of the issues that seniors are facing with addiction and mental health problems, particularly in light of the pandemic, which has exacerbated many of these problems. Louise is delightful, I have to say. She is a very caring and loving person whose approach is one of empowerment and love. And that's what makes her a very special person. And please enjoy the episode. This is Dr. Louise Stanger. Good morning, Louise Stanger.
Good morning. It's so nice to meet you and be with you today.
You too. And big thanks to Shane Anderson for introducing us and making this possible. And I'm so glad that we get to finally talk. I've heard so many wonderful things about the work that you do and the kind of person you are.
Oh, thank you. And Shane is just the best. So a big shout out to Shane right now.
See, Shane, you get mentioned on a podcast more than once. How about that? He's probably listening and laughing right now. So you have worked in the field of recovery, addiction, mental health for quite a while, decades, and you teach people. So let's start with how you got into this field and then talk about a little bit about what you're doing, and then we'll get into your book and all kinds of stuff. We're here for a while.
Okay, well, thank you. So I sort of was born on a fault line of trauma. My family of origin, though very, very successful, was filled with substance use disorder, mental health, anxiety, depression, bipolar, death by suicide, and yet they were creative, resilient, and I always thought we were just a little strange. And so I grew up at the ripe old age of 20 and became a social worker, and actually had gone from Pittsburgh, where my undergraduate degree, Pitt, was, and had married my first husband, who is deceased. And we ended up in San Diego because when you were a Navy dentist, usually in those days, you got your training by being in the service. And that was sort of the height of Vietnam. And at that time, I went to graduate school at San Diego, what was then San Diego State College School of Social Work. And I was a good writer, at least good enough for social work. I can't say good enough as an English lit writer. And I was invited to teach at the Graduate School of Social Work. And along the way, addiction just seemed to always circle its head around me. And I was really trying to sort it out and figure it out. And so when the law changed, and the law changed for graduate schools or for undergraduate schools, that social workers, marriage family counselors, psychologists had to have a course, a semester course in substance use, because people were looking at the numbers and seeing how it was related to so many other things. I had the opportunity of creating the first course in Southern California on a college level. It was really easy for me to bring in guest lecturers. And one day, I brought in a gentleman, and as short as I am, he was as tall as Shane, though, and very stately.
Yeah, like 6'5".
Yeah, he was a pastor, and his name was Dr. Frank Picard. And at that time, he was the director of a treatment center in Oregon called Springbrook. But when Dr. Picard spoke, I am not too sure what the rest of my class was doing. My heart stopped. He wrote a book in opposition to the granddaddy of intervention, who was Vern Johnson, called Family Intervention. And Dr. Picard described my family. And I just was so caught by what he said. The other thing I was so caught for is, as a social worker, I am absolutely positively phenomenal in crisis. You give me a crisis, I can solve it. I can be very solution focused. I can navigate through, and I can weather it, because I myself had experienced 5 sudden deaths in my lifetime. So crisis was sort of my middle name. And I wanted to do what Dr. Picard did. So he actually trained me in the old-fashioned sort of surprise intervention, and I would do those on the side. I was sort of wooed away from San Diego State by the University of San Diego, which is a small private Catholic university that had a higher per capita drinking rate, and I wanted to get a grant. My ego said, oh, you need to get this $1 million grant because you can do it there. And it was a parent-based intervention to reduce high-risk problematic drinking. So I left San Diego State and I went over to USD, which was a great experience because it leads me to where I am today. I was able to get the grant. I was able to bring in more money than they had ever seen. And I was a terrible fit. I just didn't fit into the milieu in quite the same way. And I was a great collaborator. Like, I'm great at putting together teams of people that I think are equal or they can do different things, but I wasn't so great with an inherited staff. And in January that year, I left the university because I said, I've been doing these on the side all the time. Why don't I just put a shingle up? I've been doing, and I also do them differently. I did them no surprises. I hired a teammate. I thought it should be invitational. Why don't I just do that? So in my brain, I just developed, I thought I'd be first in the yellow pages. Maybe only you and I remember what the yellow pages are.
Yes, we
so
do.
I called it AAI, All About Interventions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I really started my company. And I was blessed in that, even though I was in San Diego, I did not know the entire world of recovery or treatment. And again, I came in as a family member, someone who had been in recovery from family, thanks to a family program many years ago. And I met a treatment facility owners who are still in business today. They're Ed and Marianne Spatola. They've been in business for over 30 years. They're originally from New Jersey. It's called Newfound Life. And they invited me to go speak at a conference in Florida at the Breakers. And so I talked about what I'm passionate about, which is family. And I had never been at one of those conferences before. It was huge and there were so many players, but I was blessed. On that day, in that particular time, I gave a dynamite lecture. How do I know that? Well, I didn't know it at the time, but this large group all of a sudden reached out to me and said, "You are the fan favorite lecturer." And I could never figure that out. But that helped propel me on my way.
Wow, that was an amazing story.
Yeah.
I was fascinated, and this comes up a lot in my podcast, is the role that trauma in a family plays in mental health issues and addiction. I know, we talk about people that are addicted having a physical allergy, and yes, that is true. But there is a trauma factor, I think, that may exacerbate that more with those people than others, and it may even be the sole reason. I don't know if that is even a popular stance, where trauma is the thing that people are trying to escape and they become addicts because of this, because of trauma.
I think that's a great question. First of all, let me just define trauma for you, because trauma could be both subjective and objective. Subjective, somehow or other, I'm told I'm not good enough. Objective, something happens to me. So in my first book, which I wrote, which is memoir, Falling Up, you can learn that as a young child, I was told I was too fat, I had lawyers as uncles, and they said I had bad table manners. I just wasn't good enough, somehow. But it's on a subjective level. When I was 7 years old, I was at dinner and suddenly my mother had to leave. And I was still stuck with these uncles who were just always yucky, always icky. And I had to spend the night there only to be woken up with my mother and a friend with alcohol on their breast, letting me know that my father went to fly with angels, which meant he died. But I didn't know how he died, because in those days they wanted to shield you. You weren't allowed to go to the funeral. And there was all this hush hush. But let me tell you, when I was in third grade and I returned to school, I was out on the playground. And I felt really strange going back to school and everything. I didn't really want to go back. I didn't have a dad anymore. Everybody was sort of peculiar, but I didn't know why. And then all of a sudden, little Ruthie Ann, she had big red hair and freckles, and she skipped on over to me. And, I forgot, I know how my father died. He must have been like Superman. He died from kryptonite. That's what I had imagined in my head. And she came over, skipping over, and she said to me, "Louise Ann, do you know how your father died?" Well, I wasn't going to tell Ruthie Ann she was taken out by kryptonite. And so I just sort of had a quizzical look. And then she said, "With the sound of thunder, I am sure, resonating through my body, he hung himself with a tie." And that's how I met, that sort of trauma. If I went back, and I'm pretty famous, Shane can tell you because he knows how to do them, family mapping, we take a look and we look at, just try and figure out about a family. We would learn historically that my poor father followed in his mother's and father's footsteps, who also died by suicide at 48. If I took a look at my mom, who definitely had a substance abuse problem, anxiety and depression, she was given the dubious task of taking care of my grandmother, who was institutionalized in a pretty famous place, Chestnut Lodge. That's where the author of, Tuesdays with Maury, that's where he interned. But the very rich were sent there when they wanted to get out of the way of political. Yeah. And my uncles really wanted her money. They were friends with one uncle took the psychiatrist across the country, to Europe. My other uncle was best friends with the judge who committed her.
Oh, so they were just pure manipulative crooks.
So in my family history, I mean, literally. And then marrying a person, my first husband was certainly talented, but certainly had isms. I certainly could breed little isms, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so my passion for wanting to work with family or wanting to change family comes from my own family of origin, and knowing that addiction, alcoholism, addiction, it is a disease, and that it is progressive, chronic, and left untreated, fatal, but that families also play a part in the disease.
Absolutely.
And the change and transformation is possible.
I heard a definition of trauma the other day. What trauma actually means, like the definition, I don't know where this went back to, if it was some sort of, original language of something, that it means being separate from yourself. That whatever happens, you are separated in either imagined or real ways from your true nature. Now, whether it's by abusive language or belief systems that don't really resonate with the true self, or actual events that cause people to dissociate from who they are because it's too painful or whatever it is, that really is the root of it. And then getting back to, and we can talk about how we do that, getting back to that true person is really where the healing is.
Well, getting back to who you are, but don't forget that today I will argue that we're all living in a collective trauma bubble.
No kidding.
So, when you start talking about trauma, it's collective, and we can talk about earthquakes, we can talk about floods, we can talk about the fires last year, the Woolsey fire, the Malibu fires. We can talk about all those things. And yes, there is a way that we try to navigate, like, this is just not so. And if obviously some, you may disassociate, say, for example, you had unwanted sexual advances, but you're learning how can I help navigate or numb this thought, which is really, that I'm good enough or not. And oftentimes people might turn to alcohol, other drugs, they might turn to food, disordered eating, to help ease the pain or make up a story. And so I guess, I realize there's all these trauma-based therapies, and I probably have got too many initials next to my name to say what I'm actually skilled in. I think that the most important thing we have to do with anybody is start where our client is. Yeah. And listen to their story, because their story is unique and their tales are unique. So you have to sort of throw out the textbook, so to speak, and then also look for resiliency and strength, and affirm someone for being able to navigate the way they have, and take a look at like how things are working and what can we do differently? How can we make this even better?
Yeah, I always look at these things that we do to make ourselves feel better as survival tools, that we reach a point that they're not working anymore and we need something else to replace them. So what I like to say is, thank the survival tool rather than this is something I have to get rid of. It's like, oh, well, alcohol really did serve me. It made me feel okay for X number of years in these awkward and fearful situations. Now it's turned on me, but I can thank it for what it did for me. So it's not this terrible enemy. It's this thing that no longer serves me. That's how I like to look at that kind of stuff. I love that,
because that's how, when we work with families, we know that families are often, we use the word denial. Families coalesce around the identified loved one, or the person that has the substance use or mental health or chronic pain disorder. And they're used to functioning that way. And they might look the other way. Oh, it's really not that bad. Or they might say, because we're older, oh, you know what, they're 70, who cares? It's just the way, Aunt Louise is. We don't need to do anything about it. Or they'll say, well, it's really not that bad. After all, I still have a house. I still have good things. I have blah, 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 blah. But denial wears out its welcome, both with the family and with the identified loved one, the person who's experiencing the substance use disorder. because it no longer serves its purpose. So you're absolutely positively correct.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this article that I was checking out about that you were talking about, which is you called it the silver tsunami, which I found really interesting. That we're looking at, older senior citizens that are having these, substance abuse and mental health issues. It's not just, grandma's smoking weed. It's, it's like, I'm laughing because I'm picturing my grandmother smoking weed, but it's not funny. It's very, probably, particularly with the pandemic, it's probably increased a sense of loneliness, and how do you deal with that?
So ironically, I started doing some writing or looking into marijuana, and specifically when I was invited to a pot party at 72. And I went, what? And it was actually a high school reunion that was going to be held in someone's fancy house in Malibu. But I grew up in Pittsburgh. So I was from a Pittsburgher that made good to Malibu. And
I grew up in Cleveland, so
okay,
we're from the same part of the world.
Yeah, so then you understand. So in any event, like I was going, what? It said, I'll bring BYOB, bring your own booze, but I also applied the pot. And I called up my classmate because I felt really awkward. I said, this is not anything I can really do. I mean, I'm a licensed clinician. I do complicated mental health, substance abuse interventions. The last couple have been people in substance-induced psychoses from marijuana. So I feel really uncomfortable. So I'm going to, tell the truth. And so I called him up, and he just was like absolutely aghast. So he sent out an email to the rest of the class and said, a classmate has just said they don't want to come if we have marijuana. So perhaps I won't have it. I mean, could there be anything more damaging? And then I started to do research, and I found that boomers are the fastest growing population of consumers of marijuana in the country. And then I realized at the time I was doing this research, I was living in Palm Desert in Indian Wells. And I took a look around, and I realized there were two things going on. First of all, it is an older population that comes migrating in or lives there. Second of all, some of the biggest growers in the country are in the desert. And on El Paseo, which is the sort of like the rodeo, not quite, of Palm Desert, there is a wonderful store called The Leaf, which looks like a high-end dress store. And it's owned by the owners of Bighorn, which is one of the more wealthy enclaves in the desert. And the whole idea was marketing towards seniors. It can do absolutely anything for you, anytime, any place, anywhere. Then I also took a look at the data on alcohol. And in the desert, the Rouse in La Quinta sells more wine than any other Rouse in the United States. And so you don't ever want to drive in the desert after 5:00 p.m. because the people are so we're so there. And so I took a look at, what is the use of substance use and misuse amongst older adults. Obviously, there are people that have what we call late onset alcoholism, where during their life they didn't, but they're lonely and they're isolated. And we know that alcoholism or addiction is a disease of isolation, and recovery is of connection. But if you've ever gone to the CVS or the Rite Aid and looked at the checkout stand, or you've ever gone to a grocery store, you can see how it's target marketed. And so with aging does come aches and pains. And so how do I take care of them? Am I going to take care of them without? With aging does come, you lose friends, you lose your soulmates. Your world shrinks a little bit. And so there is a increase in substance use disorders amongst aging. There's also some other alarming facts, and that is death by suicide for men over 50 is high. Death by suicide of men who are age 73 or over, who just were released from a nursing home, like following a fall or an accident, it is astronomical. There are common I don't know. Maybe I should stop for a minute because I can just keep going. I'm an old professor.
So I guess, what happens to people, and I'm trying to put myself in that position because I'm nearing those ages, that how would I feel? How would I feel after, let's say, a fall? I would feel really vulnerable, really afraid. It's only going to get worse. These are some of the thoughts I would have. And if there wasn't any kind of support system, I could easily see spiraling into a very dark place very quickly. So what do you tell people to help them navigate those situations?
I would say let's take a look at that senior in your life, or that senior that you care about. Where do they live? Who do they relate to? Who are their friends? Who are their acquaintances? And what is their living situation? Because you really want to make sure that there's some sort of connection. Because if there isn't, there are ways to do it. Like I do think of Shane Anderson right now. Shane, for example, every week goes shopping for a senior. And he says he's become the best at the 99-cent store. When my mother, Dorothy Swartz Silverblatt Wallach Levine, who was this iconoclastic, she was sort of like Loretta Young, and she could design clothes better than Cher and Bob Mackie when she was younger. But she lived in Hawaii the last 16 years of her life. And she did drink, and she probably was the one person that I would have loved to have intervened on, that I never seemed to be able to get that there. But she had a Navy person that volunteered to be her helper. She also had a transvestite. She was really an interesting lady who helped take care of her. But she had some social supports to help navigate her along the way. And I think that's the first thing is, let's take a look at what are the social supports available, free or otherwise. What does this, and then take a look at the person. Not everybody is a joiner, okay?
Yep.
Not everybody likes a group, even though we know that 12-step is just fabulous for recovery. But how can we begin to join up with someone one-on-one and then help bridge them? So where in the aging community can I find like sort of a recovery coach to help them on their way, to let them remember that they are worthwhile? And to do that, obviously we have organizations or public organizations such as Adult Protective Services. Look, with aging, I remember a long time ago, I read a professor, and his name was Theodore Litz, and he said, with aging, you're no longer that well-oiled machine. You creak and groan a bit. Your eyesight changes 7 times in your lifetime. I think mine changed all at 40. I don't know what, and things don't work as well. They just don't. It's no matter, when you look in the mirror, sometimes I might see a 30-year-old, but I really am a 74-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And some things I might do might be like a 4-year-old, but I still am that person. I'm not going to say I can't be that whippersnapper or something, but I think what we can do as family members is honor that person. They have a story. They had a story, and every life is worthwhile. And so the extent to which you don't chalk it off, if grandma or grandpa or you drink too much or smoke too much, that, oh, that's just the way there is. No, there's always hope, and there's always a solution. I've done interventions or invitations to change on people probably as old as 83. And so for me to think that we couldn't always have a chance to rewrite our story, or to understand that there might be other factors causing aberrant behaviors. So with one woman who was wonderfully, she was beautiful. She was a physician, and she was originally from India, but she had early onset Alzheimer's, and that's what was causing all the gambling. But instead of being shamed and everything by her family, it's really being able to get that physical, that with a gerontologist, to find out what's going on, or to go check on somebody.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is missing in our society a lot, is the idea of neighborhoods and communities that check on each other. There's a woman that lives across the street from me who her husband died 20 plus years ago, and she's been living alone since then, no children. And she started to lose some of her mental faculties.
Sure.
And no one was really helping until my wife and I just went, can we help you? We have to help you. And so we've taken on this responsibility, which was quite a bit at first. It's sort of a well-oiled machine now. And she was fortunate to have long-term care insurance. So between us navigating her needs in all areas, she's as happy as I've ever seen her. She has people living with her, two different women that take care of her, and they have meals with her, and they watch TV.
Thinking about that, in LA, there's Meals on Wheels. Last Thanksgiving, on this Thanksgiving, we delivered food from Angel Food, Project Angel Food, for Thanksgiving. There's all kinds of access of resources you can do. It just takes somebody willing to do that.
Well, that's the thing.
Willing to say, hey, someone's worth the risk. And, youth is always undulated before our eyes. It's good looking, it's sexy. Think of the magazine. Kim Kardashian sells. Even though Meryl Streep is beautiful, she doesn't sell as well. Let's face it, you've been in the entertainment industry. How many parts are for aging women?
Yeah, right, sure.
And so, I think that when you take a look at it, the crazy part about aging is, are you ready for this?
Yes, I am.
Unless something happens, everybody gets to grow old. And yet there is this, you talk about disassociation, it's not me. Never will it be me. And, and so, oh, really? That doesn't look like me. I mean, and so if we want to really take care of ourselves, we want to do some planning. The other thing that's really, I think, keeps people alive is intergenerational work. When I founded a before and after daycare in Cardiff by the Sea many, many years ago, we made sure that it was intergenerational, meaning that there were grandparents that were hired to work at the daycare, not for their own children, but there was intergenerational sorts of daycare. In the same fashion, there doesn't need to be age segregated housing.
I was that was this fascinating thing I read, and I don't remember what country it was, but what they did was they took a retirement community and they rented rooms to college students. They screened them pretty well and gave them really good prices on their rent in exchange for being active in the lives of the seniors. And it was a really wonderful symbiotic relationship that these people developed with each other. And it was pure genius. It was so obvious once you read about it. And, we don't really do that here. And maybe there are some communities that are doing that. I don't know. I haven't heard about it. But when I read that article, I went, this makes complete sense. Everybody wins in that situation.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I really, I really believe that. I know that my professor, who's 93, and he's sharp as a tack, although he's lost his eyesight, lives in a facility called Wesley Palms in San Diego. And what brings him joy, he was genius. I mean, I never understood what he said before when I was 20. And even sometimes when he talks now, I just chuckle away because he's so existentially brilliant, Dr. Hayworth. And I always I honor him in any of my books because at 20, he believed in me. And he told me anyone could be authentic. But even there, they've had a couple groups that are run by college students or young master's degree students. And it makes such a difference because these people that are living in age segregated housing, they had lives and they were brilliant. And, they have a craft to share. It may not be the way you do it, but it may be the way.
Let's talk about your new book.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, it's my third book, and I'm really excited about it. It's called Addiction in the Family, and it's helping families navigate challenges, emotions, and recovery. I think there's a couple things that are really unique about it. One, I was commissioned by a media house to write it during COVID. This book was written during COVID. I signed a contract in March, It was done in June. And it's really built on, and I don't get residuals for it. So, but I really want you to buy it.
Okay.
It's a guidebook that I think everybody needs. It's a guidebook I wish I had. It is founded on two principles. People call us up and they're in crisis, and they asked really two major questions. What can I do? And what can I say? What should I say? And so this book really is 6 easy chapters. You can pick up any chapter at any time. Explains what addiction is. Explains what recovery means. It talks about what types of treatment there are. It gives case examples, and it at the end of every chapter there's a self-care activity, because it's so important for you as a family member to also take care of yourself. So whether it's breathing, whether it's walking, whether it's meditating, whether it's journaling, obviously the last chapter is being of service. It's inviting you also to take care of yourself. And it teaches you how to talk to people.
The idea of this keeping it a secret because of shame to the family, and not talking about it, or having somebody be so resistant, that's really a hard thing too. I would think in interventions is when you have somebody who's very resistant, that doesn't want to admit to themselves or to other people that they have a problem, even though they know they do. How do you break through that?
I love that question. Thank you. Well, first of all, no is just a conversation starter in our business. We have a saying, Eskimos have 1,000 words for snow. I've heard 1,000 words for no. And what you try and do is you develop a team that's really coached to break into what we call the honeycomb of denial. And we do that through heart-centered scientific work. There is, and really it is heart, hurt, and hope. We invite all the people that are participants. First, we learn about them. We interview them individually. I use a research methodology called portraiture, developed by Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot of Harvard, and I've used it before in major research projects. But we invite you, tell me something about yourself. I want to learn about you. And then I'm going to ask you, what's special about the loved one, the person that we tell me something special. There's nothing. I hate them. And you go, well, go back in your memory. What was a good memory? Because we got to break into their honeycomb. And, maybe it was when we were little kids, we went, fishing, or, you helped me with my mother, or whatever it is, there's always something. And then what's breaking your heart today? Well, last week when I went to see him, he couldn't even remember my name, and he yelled and he screamed, and I watched, and there were all those people hanging on. I think I'm just going to digress a minute. I just wrote an article yesterday, which is on my website, which will be up, and it's on the death of Tony Heish, Delivering Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And, here is a 47-year-old genius Harvard graduate who was hell-bent on developing Zappos, delivering happiness, and yet he was surrounded like the emperor with the emperor's new clothes of yes people who didn't choose to intervene, with the exception of, my understanding is Jewel, the singer, had met him on Necker Island with Richard Branson, and she was invited to Park City, and she went there, and she left the day later. And she didn't have a team, but she wrote, and at that time he was so obsessed that he wouldn't even take a letter. He wouldn't take email or other things. So she wrote him a letter. And she said to him, I'm worried about you. You're surrounded by people who don't care. And you're using too many drugs. Now, if Jewel could have multiplied herself, or there were other people that were in that room, maybe Tony would not have died the way he died this past week.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the thing is that you're trying to break into the honeycomb of denial. And by doing that, you tell stories. We as interventionists don't do much. If we're good, we're like a butterfly or a tarantula on the wall. Take your pick, but very soft, because all these people have beautiful stories about the person. And when you're surrounded by a group, and it has to be in a group. I mean, it's not like that traditional like you see on TV, because we can sidebar off, but the power of a group to break into denial is so great. And it's not like you need to read a letter, because I like you to talk from your heart. But what's special? And this is a living eulogy. And intervention is essentially a living eulogy. I'm saying to you how special you are, how much I care about you, and how frightened. And I'm also telling you, I want you to go get help today. I don't really have to tell you what I'm not willing to do anymore unless you get feisty and you say no. And then you have to decide, this person's been given an invitation. They may have letters to go with them. Do they need time just to sit and process? Because I'm not going to have you over for the football game every Sunday. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not going to go out with you and watch you drink, watch you fall down. I'm not even going to come to the hospital when you fall down, puncture your lung because you've been drinking too much, nor am I going to bail you out of jail when you had a DUI, ran into 3 cars, ran away from the police and hit the person. I'm going to take away your business. I'm not going to do that anymore. You try not to get to all those boundaries, and if you can do it through acts of love. So to me, I think invitations to change are central. They have to be done. They're orchestrated, yes. They're both an art and a science. Not everybody can go do them. I think you need training.
The part that might be tough would be, well, I'm sure all of it's tough, but the idea of how the family and the loved ones get just as sick.
I give families no fault insurance. I think everybody did the best they could do with the resources they had. And thanks so much for engaging us. And maybe we can learn how to do things a little bit differently. Because it's true, a family coalesces unconsciously around the loved one. And everybody benefits from, if Johnny's the bad one, or Shane's the bad one, or Louise is the bad one, then I can still stay the good one. But if Shane gets better or Louise gets better, then what happens to my position? And all this is on an unconscious level. I don't get to be the star anymore.
Right.
So you have to retrain. So when I work with people, I mean, obviously we work in an at your service capability. I don't work with a lot of families at one time, but I don't just come in and do an intervention, hello, goodbye, because I'm not interested in doing that.
Right. It's a lot of research on the dynamics of them.
So we do solution-focused recovery coaching. And so we work with families over a period of 60 to 90 days or even longer if they want. And we help them navigate those changes. We reconnect them out there with other resources. And sometimes when you do an intervention on one person, or they call you up and say, I want to intervene on my wife, I go, you have to go to treatment first before I can do that. I have done that.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think.
And then they go, me.
Yeah, you. And we did that. Mr. Anderson can verify that did happen. And they did go, and it changed. And then they were an adult child of an alcoholic like me, and they made changes. And then their wife could go, but nothing was going to happen. Nothing changes. 97% of all intervention work is first done with the family. That could be naval family. It could be the business manager, the estate manager, the entertainment attorney. It's all those things. The hairdresser. It's not just always mom, dad, brother, sister.
Now you also teach.
The University of California, San Diego, and I just signed a contract to develop an advanced intervention course. It's going to be offered in the summer of this year, and it'll be Zoom, and I'm trying to figure out whether it's going to be totally one that could be accessed like in perpetuity, or it could be accessed, and it'll be given to people who are interested. I mean, they could be professionals in the community, as well as people who are getting an alcohol and other drug certificate.
I don't know what made me just think of this, but You know how they, particularly with teenagers that are under 18, that are just completely off the rails. Sometimes they have these people that, I guess, for lack of a better word, kidnap them.
That's why I was okay. So I don't understand that.
I don't either, but I understand a parent's frustration with a kid who's just completely unreachable.
There are people that come in, and what I've never understood, but they're so afraid of these adolescents that people have called us from their cars. They're locked in their cars. And I go, why are you in your car? Oh, by the way, this also happens with 40-year-olds if they're living at home. The people are afraid to talk about their child because they don't want them to hear, because they now rule the roost. We've had people who put locks on the doors, on the garages, because these people, so they're living in abject terror. And I think, I'm not an adolescent specialist, although I do a lot of training for Paradigm and have done that. That's always my wheelhouse. But I do think parents can learn how to take their power back. And I think the days of extractions, which you hear like that, maybe happened 35 years ago. I don't know that they're still going on. Maybe they are, but that's no way to get a kid to treatment. I always think when you're under 18, your parents can still rule the roost. When parents are just afraid, they're afraid to say, well, you have to go, they'll live out on the street and be homeless.
Well, that's, the dilemma for some parents is the kid is out of control. They're creating havoc in the home. Maybe there's younger children also that are being affected adversely, and it's a risk to their safety. Mm-hmm. Yet legally, the parents are responsible. Right. So a kid's 15, 16, and it's impossible to have them in the house because they're so out of control. Yet if you kick them out, you're in trouble as a parent legally.
When you do safe transport, a lot of time there are two people that will do the safe transport. You want to make sure that someone's in the back seat. You don't want to see anyone, you have child locks on, but you do that for an adult too.
Yeah.
You want to just make sure that it's safe. And I think the beautiful thing is that people are given an opportunity to rewrite their story, because I really believe that transformation comes through rewriting your story. With recovery, however you define recovery, and I think everybody's worthy of rewriting their story. Yes. I never met anybody in my life that said, hey, when I grow up, guess what I want to be when I grow up? Woo, I want someone to call me alcoholic addict. Yeah. I want someone to call me blah, 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 blah. No, it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. And I really invite people to drop the stigma. This is a disease. People with this disease do terrible things. I am not saying they don't, but it's a disease. And everybody deserves to have a life well lived. And whether you're 84, 74, or 14, how can we help you rise to your best possible self? How can we help you navigate some of the challenges you face? And what other coping skills can we give you so you don't have to rely on mind-altering substances to navigate your way? Because they do take on and have a life of their own.
The interesting thing about what you're saying is, there's that old saying, there's no second acts in life, but there are. There are. And this is the way to do it. If you're suffering from some of the things we've been talking about. Thank you so much for talking to me today. That went so fast.
Oh, you are such a nice person to talk to. I'm just so excited to be able to be with you.
Oh, same here.
And I'd love to learn more about what you do. And thank you so much for doing the podcast and for inspiring change.
Yeah, that's why I do it. That's the impetus, is to, help people to find ways to heal and become more vast, I guess would be the let's plug your website. So people can go visit you and see your books and find out everything they need to know about you.
So if you want to, first of all, I'm going to pick up my phone for a second because I am I am my own personal assistant. So if you're really in trouble and you want to give a call 619-507-1699, and I do pick it up my own phone.
Wow.
Or when you go to my website, which is called allabout-interventions.com.
Is there an S on the end of that? Interventions?
Interventions.com.
All about interventions. Okay.
Interventions.com, www. Or you can Google my name, Louise Stanger, and it'll probably take you there. Whatever questions we get, we always answer. Sometimes Shane does answer all those questions, and he's so much better looking than me and so much nicer that you can see him on my About page.
He's better looking than most people.
Yeah, he's a little easier in the eyes, but he's so talented, so we shouldn't really say that about him.
Well, it's one doesn't detract from the other. Thanks so much, Louise. I really appreciate it, and I hope that we get to speak again.
Well, Bob, take care. I hope we get to meet in non-COVID land.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
All right.
Much thanks for you guys listening in to the episode today. And I'd like to invite you again to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and big, big, big hugs and thanks to Dr. Louise Stanger for visiting me on the show today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.